Infowars, so we hope you check that out. We'll be back in just a moment with more news. Stay tuned. I'm Aaron Dykes.
If you believe in this information and want to support its viral spread, go to the Infowars store at Infowars.com. We've got the new G.I. Joe Infowars t-shirts. We've got the incredible Pro Pure gravity-fed filters available at Infowars.com in the store. We've got a new DVD, Scientists Under Attack, the Don't Tread on Me flag. We've got all sorts of different bumper stickers to help spread the rebellion virally. It's all there, wristbands, citizen rule books in every order. Order online at Infowars.com today. The water filters, the canteens, it's all there. Infowars.com.
And we are back from break on this Infowars Nightly News broadcast transmission. Again, I'm Aaron Dykes. Now, in case you haven't noticed, all the things that have been happening in this country have been sort of scripted. One response leads to the other. The whole war on terrorism was meant to invoke this vague, shadowy, paranoid threat that the hidden terrorists could look like anyone, could be anywhere inside the country, just in time for this total economic implosion and the clampdown response. Now, as a continuation of that, you don't see the fact that bin Laden's been captured or high-level targets like al-Awlaki have been reportedly killed. No, you see more clampdown, more paranoid secret police behavior, and now Paul Watson continues to report on the DHS use of new smart streetlights. DHS official, you would never know if new streetlights were spying on you, and it quotes Fox News in Charlotte, speaking with the Deputy Homeland Security Director there in Charlotte, who says, with these new smart street lamps, you'd never know if the street lights were spying on you. And as Paul points out in the article, it is just like the book 1984, where they have hidden microphones, hidden cameras. You never know who in society might be the secret police waiting to bust you on a thought crime, on some idea, without even the evidence of there being a crime, the idea that you could be involved in a crime. They're going to watch out for that. At the same time, Fox Charlotte was told that these street lamps could also be used to pick up movement at certain hours of the day, as in to enforce a curfew. Curfew for what? For the threat of riots, over economic conditions, over a possible terrorist. Let's look at what's really happening in this country. And this disgusting quote here: if the city installed streetlights with surveillance abilities, which are in these new programmed cameras that also put out government alerts and warnings, you would never know, Charlotte's Homeland Security Chief was quoted as saying. Just a further disgusting development in the total takeover of our country. Meanwhile, just what Ventura warned about, just what Alex has been warning about really for well over a decade, that there's going to be highway checkpoints and a whole lot more. More states accept TSA Viper teams at transportation hubs. And you saw a couple weeks ago where Tennessee was supposedly the first state to use these Viper teams for their random inspections. We know it was already brought out in Florida at the bus and train stations, and they say it could be randomly anywhere in the country. The new Viper team budget for 2012 was given at $109 million, and up to 37 Viper teams could be deployed anywhere in the country randomly to find behavior detection, for inspection, for security screening, and for random law enforcement checks, unpredictable deployments throughout the transportation sector. You've seen it already justified in the 100-mile border zones for drug and immigration interdiction, in total violation of the Fourth Amendment. Now they're going to do it randomly on highways because of the various threats they say could be coming. So that's another important thing to look out for. And why aren't they talking about that issue? And why, when the people say no to body scanners and the invasive activity at airports, does it have to expand to Viper Team? It's a Homeland Security program. You better believe, just like FDR said all those years ago, that if it happens in government, it was planned that way. And there's a plan for this TSA police state rollout, and we better say no as loud as we can before it's totally too late. Meanwhile, the protests going on around the world are continuing to escalate, with police getting ready for a violent response. They've now announced their, quote, right in London to fire rubber bullets on protesters, under the pretext of protecting police should their lives be endangered. Something that, while I'm not indicting the London police or the UK police here, but in general, there's been an overreaction about the safety of these officers and a clampdown on what is typically very peaceful protesting. The quote here, by contrast, more than 4,000 police will oversee tomorrow's march, expected to attract crowds of 10,000. 4,000 police for a crowd of 10,000. That's because they supposedly believe it's going to get violent. Meanwhile, you've seen in places like Oakland, the Occupy Oakland protest has already gotten violent with police. They've already fired rubber bullets at former Marines, at journalists, other regular people who haven't done anything wrong. And they've also identified provocateurs, police provocateurs in the crowds there. So we know that's going on. You've seen Alex's films, Police State 2, The Takeover, and the rest of it, where they put government-paid provocateurs in at these protests to give them all a bad name and specifically to justify this overreacted police response. Now in Oakland, the police have lacerated Army Ranger's spleen, causing internal bleeding, and they denied him medical treatment for 18 hours. And they beat him with nightsticks on his back, ribs, and shoulders and lacerated his spleen. That's a veteran known as Kayvan Samgehi. And they say he was the second former American serviceman, and only in the past 2 weeks, to be badly hurt in Oakland at the protest. And they claim he was resisting arrest and remaining present at the site of a riot, whatever exactly that means. Now, things have gotten crazy there. They claim that some protesters have set fire to a hastily assembled barrier. But we know there's a lot of provocateuring going on, and we just need to continue to speak out against this and look out at what's happening. Meanwhile, in Fresno, also in California, Occupy protesters were told by police that the local penal code not to occupy the park outstrips the U.S. constitutional right to free speech, to the freedom of assembly, the right to address your grievances and otherwise gather together peacefully in public. They've arrested some 20 protesters and ordered the rest of them out of the park there in Fresno, and they specifically asked the police what they were enforcing, saying it was the penal code, and specifically saying it overrides the First Amendment and the Constitution. And they also specifically asked these police officers if they were going to obey the oath to the Constitution they took, you know, kind of the Oath Keepers pledge that people, good patriots, have spread the message about all across the country. And they said no. We're going to just enforce this penal code and damn the Constitution. What's it worth anyway, right? Amazing, right? Isn't that amazing? He said, no Constitution in America, no protection for your First Amendment constitutional right to peaceably assemble. We're radicals because we stand here defending our constitutional right to peaceably assemble. That, of course, was Hunter, one of the protesters. Just more evidence of how they're using the evacuation of these Occupy protests and kind of the unwelcome continuation as a pretext to get kind of forceful and clamp down on free speech in this country. And why not? That's just the way things are going to go. We'll keep an eye on that general situation as it unfortunately continues to develop. Meanwhile, we have a guest coming up, Keith Haley. He's going to talk about the forced mandates for flood insurance, specifically in his area in Michigan, but I know this is going on all across the country. Meanwhile, yesterday, Alex reported on the Missouri residents who are upset by the order to move lake homes, and this is from the Federal Energy Regulation Commission, who have cited various designations for a hydroelectric dam, and they themselves have kind of mapped out a zone where they plan to evacuate residents because of the interest of this dam, even though many of the people have been there 80 years or more. And they say basically any improvement since a certain time is grounds to destroy that property and seize it for this private interest in this kind of quasi public-private partnership that is part of the larger takeover of our public waterways. And you've heard about the rural councils. There's a dozen or more, probably a couple dozen federal agencies, including the Department of Defense, including Homeland Security, including FEMA, and they plan to exert jurisdiction where it doesn't exist over rural areas all across the country, and that most certainly includes waterways. You probably remember a couple years ago when they declared that due to the threat of terrorism, the feds could have jurisdiction over all federal waterways, including puddles. Here you have President Obama's Executive Order 13575 creating the rural councils. There was an amazing clip on that we played previously in past Infowars broadcasts. So for more on the federal government's takeover of private property through various excuses and justifications, we go now to Keith Haley. He's an activist in the Michigan area, and he has a long background with weather forecasting. He was part of various computer forecasting programs. He was also a severe weather observer for the National Weather Service, among other parts of his background. So we are joined by him now to talk about how FEMA is forcing people to buy insurance. Are you there, sir?
Exactly. Hey, good afternoon. My name is Keith Haley. I've been living here in my home for 48 years since 1963, December of. So it's going to be 48 years this coming December. It started out last December or so. I received a letter from Wells Fargo Mortgage Company stating that I have to have mortgage insurance. I said, this must be some mistake. Because when we bought our mortgage, I actually signed up for it in 2003, everything was fine and dandy. I mean, they said, Mr. Haley, you don't have to worry about anything. You're not in a flood zone whatsoever. And come to behold, I wind up getting a notification, and I asked, is this some mistake? They said, well, FEMA told them that to tell us, the mortgagees, that we have to have flood insurance. I said, this is ridiculous. I've been living here in my home at that time 47 years, haven't had any floods whatsoever. I've been living here since the age of 8 years old. And since I'm a severe weather spotter, I also tell National Weather if we have any what we call flooding. Well, all the years I've been living here, we haven't ever had the river even come close to my front doorstep. I'm better than 100 feet away from the river.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and then here it is, I was told that I had to have 45 days notice to get it done, or that the mortgage company would find flood insurance for me at an even higher rate. So I went up going on YouTube, and I says, what's going on? And there was this one couple out, I believe in Colorado, didn't jump to the tune of the mortgage company, and they had to, quote, get flood insurance. And this was a little tiny stream, wasn't even worth to say anything of any water to come out of the ground. So they, even though they had maybe 15 or 20 feet worth of a small brook or a little stream, they had to have what we call flood insurance. And then because of that, they don't know what they're going to do, how to pay for their mortgage, because of the simple fact is that FEMA told them through their mortgage company they have to have flood insurance.
Exactly. So we were talking about redrawing the maps, expanding the flood zones, and then forcing people to buy really expensive, and as you point out in the documents you sent us, really pretty useless insurance. Tell them how much it cost.
Okay, for me, $800 with a $5,000 deductible, and that's not even including anything for your contents of your home. They said that you have to have that amount of insurance to cover for the full value of your home. Well, Michigan took has taken quite a few hits, and they say kind of make a pun out of it. Our mortgage is underwater, ha ha.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because it's at that time when we took the mortgage out, it was worth say $100,000. We'd be lucky if we get 40 out of it, but yet it has to be for the full replacement value. And that gets to be adding up to a few thousands of dollars. Well, as it stands right now, I am on Social Security. My wife is too, and I get a small state pension. And now with this $800, there's no guarantee it's going to stop at $800. Next year it could be $1,000. It could be $1,200 the following year. Especially with all the disasters that has taken place here in the United States, and FEMA being broke, how much more will it go up? We are already paying taxes, and FEMA is part of Homeland Security. We're always paying a big chunk for this or a big chunk of that. I have to live within my budget. Why can't the government live within theirs? And I just see it as a big power grab, and also more of a confiscation of what we call our monies that we do have, what we're getting. And since I just recently got a 3.6 increase, oh yes, I'm living under big money. It amounts to is maybe $30 or $35. And what can you buy, especially with what's going on in the stores and especially at the gas pumps? And I just find it ridiculous. Now, add insult to injury, they told me I had to have everything done in 45 days. I just recently received the policy in July.